Okay, folks, in this video we are going to go over the lasso selection tools or lasso tools. Now, the lasso tools are located right here. We have three tools that are all lasso. Let's start off with the regular default lasso tool. The lasso tool is a selection tool which you can use to draw your selections with. So take notice as I trace the edge of the flower here. Okay, and all you have to do is left mouse click and hold down the left mouse button as you drag your mouse to draw out the line. Okay, so I'm going to left mouse click and hold it down and begin to draw my line here. Okay, now I'm not going to go perfect. This is just to show you folks how the tool works. So, if I really wanted to, I would take a little bit more time to oh, to follow a little bit more closer and not make a mistake like that. Okay, and I'm just gonna do this petal. Now, before I continue, you notice uh, I forget my biology terms here. I'm not sure what is that, the stamens, steeples, or whatnot. Anyway, the yellow portion of the flower here. Uh, you can draw around them, but it's going to take a long time to get into every nook and cranny and crevice. So I'm just going to go over the general area of them and back up to the starting point. With the lasso tools, you have to go back to your starting point to close off the line. And just let go of your left mouse button, and there you go. You got a selection of the area that you drew. Now, in a situation like this, where you have a straight line, you can actually edit that. In order to take away or subtract the extra line, all you got to do is hold down the Option key on a Mac, the Alt key on a PC. If you notice my lasso cursor here, when I hold down the Option key or Alt key, you notice there's a minus next to it now. That means when I start drawing with it, it'll subtract from the selection or take away. And all you have to do is encircle or draw a circle around the area you don't want to have selected. So I'm going to draw a little circle around this area. And remember, you have to close it off. So go back to the starting point and let go of my left mouse button, and it takes away. Now, if I wanted to add to the selection area, I would hold down the Shift key and watch my cursor as I push the Shift key down. There's a plus next to it now, okay? And just like the subtraction key or the Alt key or Option key, you can draw any shape you want to add. So I'm just going to draw a quick circle. But what you want to do is make sure you cross the dotted lines here so that Photoshop knows that you want to add to this selection. You can add to the selection separately, make a separate selection off to the side here. But if you want to add to the existing selection, you have to cross somewhere across the dotted line. So let me show you that now. So if I cross like that, you notice that Photoshop adds to the selection. Let me undo that. Now, if I wanted to make a separate selection off to the side here, that is sort of part of this selection, but not joined to the selection, I can do so by holding down the shift key, and I'll just draw a shape here like that. So now these two items are sort of like in the same selection, but they're not joined together, if that makes sense. Okay, let me undo that. Okay, so, oh, by the way, to add to the selection, you hold down the shift key. That's the same for PC as well as the Mac. It's only when you subtract from a selection that the Mac has the option key that you use, and the PCs have the alt key that you use. Okay. Okay. So with our lasso, we can draw our selection. Remember, with the rectangular um, marquee tool and the elliptical marquee tool, all we could do is make square shapes, rectangle shapes, circle, or oval shapes. With this tool, it's a little bit more, I guess, creative. You can draw out your selections. And just like the marquee select tools, you can use the selection as a boundary, meaning that whatever's on the inside of your selection is affected by another tool. Whatever's on the outside is not affected. So if I go back to my paintbrush tool here, and let's choose another color. I'm going to choose yellow. Okay, got yellow selected there. Now if I start to paint on the outside of the dotted lines, nothing will happen. But once I pass on the inside, then you'll see the brush stroke. Okay, so let me make my brush cursor a little bit bigger so you can see there. Yeah, now you can see my paintbrush cursor. So, and you notice the stroke changes as well. So this is a good way to actually paint something. Okay, kind of like keeping it within the lines. Yeah, where nothing else is affected but just that. So it's a good way to paint. Let me undo that. Now remember, if you want to affect the outside but not the in, you have to do a select inverse. And just like the marquee tools, if you're on your paintbrush, you have to go back to your selection tool, click on that, and if you recall, there's a number of ways to select the inverse. You can right click, do a select inverse. You can come up to the select menu option and do inverse. Then you got the inverse, right? So if I go to my brush tool here and start to paint, everything on the outside is affected. But once I get to the selected area, you notice that nothing happens until I get to the outside. So as you can see, the selection tool is quite a powerful tool to have. And just like the marquee tool, it shares the same properties. It's just that, of course, in certain situations, you may want to use the marquee tool, maybe for buildings in pictures, or the elliptical tool, the circle marquee tool. You may want to use that to cut out the moon or anything circular. So keep that in mind when you folks are choosing which selection tool you want to use. Okay, let me go ahead and deselect that. To deselect, if you recall, you can right click, deselect, select in the menu bar, deselect. You can now for this tool, you cannot click on the outside here. The reason being is Photoshop will think you're trying to start the selection on outside. So I'll show you right now. If I left mouse click anywhere out here, it'll deselect, but it'll think you're trying to draw. So, um, well, I'm sorry, not with this lasso tool. With the next lasso tool, it'll think you're trying to draw. Uh, Forget what I just said about it won't deselect. It will deselect with the regular lasso tool. With the next tool I'm going to show you, the polygonal lasso tool, it won't necessarily deselect. Okay? So those are three ways. And the final way, of course, is Command D or Control D on a PC. Okay? Now for the polygonal lasso tool. Okay, the polygonal lasso tool is sort of the same as the regular lasso tool. The difference is that the polygonal lasso tool lays down points as you draw. You have to keep clicking your left mouse button as you draw. I'll go ahead and show you. So first, you left mouse click once, and that lays down a point or an anchor point or whatnot. And you notice as I move my cursor away from that point, there's a line there, okay? And the line goes in any direction, as long or as short as you want. Now, in order to draw the line, all you have to do is go out from the original starting point, left mouse click again to lay down another point, okay? And of course, you can go in any direction. And you just keep laying down points by clicking on your left mouse button, okay? Like so. You can lay down as much points as you want. All you have to do is keep clicking the left mouse button and you will add another point, okay? You can cross the lines if you wanted to, but that would make for a bad selection. You want to try and avoid crossing the lines. Now, say for example, you did do this, you crossed the lines and you're like, oh, I made a mistake. How can I get rid of these points here that crossed the line? It's real easy. On your keyboard, all you do is you hit delete on the Mac and backspace on the PC keyboard. So every time you hit delete once, you subtract or you delete an anchor point. If you keep hitting the delete key, you will delete each of the anchor points, and you can go all the way back to the beginning. Okay? So the delete key or backspace key will delete anchor points, and you use your left mouse button to add anchor points. Okay? And of course, just like the lasso tool, you have to come back to your original starting point to close off the loop. Now, watch my cursor here. As I come back to the starting point, you'll notice a little circle appears at the bottom of the cursor there. Folks see it? That's an indicator that lets you know Photoshop is ready to close off the line. Left mouse click again, and you have your selection. Okay? And also, let me back up. If you're drawing out your points here, okay, and you want to close off the loop right away, you can always double click and Photoshop will shoot a connecting line straight back from wherever you are back to your original starting point. So for example, if I didn't want to continue going all the way around, I just wanted to shoot a line back, all I have to do is double click from this point and Photoshop will shoot a line straight back to the starting point. And that's the same for all of the lasso tools. So your regular lasso tool, this tool, polygonal, and the next tool we're going to get into is the magnetic. All of these tools, if you double click at any point, Photoshop will shoot a line straight back from your last point to your original starting point. So, unlike the lasso tool where you only click and hold down the left mouse button and draw, sort of like a freehand tool, this particular tool, the polygonal lasso tool, you actually have to add a point every time you want to change direction. Personally, this is my favorite lasso tool, only because it gives me the most amount of control. But it is a very tedious tool in that when you're doing organic shapes with lots of bends, twists, and turns, you have to lay down a lot of points, like what I am doing here. So on a circle, it's a little bit cumbersome, but it does give you a lot of control over your lines. Okay, so I'm not going to bother trying to get into the nooks and crannies of the yellow section. I'm just going to swim over that there and come back to the original starting point. So just like the other selection tools, if I grab the paintbrush right now and I started painting, nothing happens on the outside, but once I get on the inside. So all of the selection tools follow the same properties. It's just that how you create the dotted lines, these dotted lines here, differs from tool to tool. Okay, so keep that in mind when you folks are choosing which of these selection tools to make your selection. Okay. So I've shown you folks. Let me click back on the lasso tool here. I'm going to right click. I've shown you folks how to deselect, select the inverse, feather. Okay, I'm going to show you folks how to do a feather. We aren't really going to get into save selection or make rec path. I will show you how to do layer via copy, layer via cut, and new layer when we get into the layer system. So hold off on that for now. And I'll go ahead and show you the free transform and transform selection as well. First, the feather. What feathering does, okay, hold on. Okay, so what feathering does it provides kind of like a hazy edge, a soft edge rather than a hard edge when you're making a cut. So if I was to grab my move tool right now and cut out the petal, you have a pretty sharp edge here, right, where the cut was made. Now if you feather, let me, I forgot to click back on my selection tool here. Now if I right click, if you choose feather, you get this dialog box here. The radius of the feather is how much of a blur you want to put on the edge where you make the cut. So you use feathering mostly to create a soft edge when you're making a cut. Okay, so let's go with 5 for now, what it's already at. You folks may have a different number. If that's the case, you folks can type in the number 5, hit OK, and then go back to the move tool. I don't think it's going to, I'm not too sure. Oh yeah, it did. If you notice, if I move the pedal off to the side, you notice how soft the edge is now compared to how it was when there was no feather. Let me back up and show you that again. Okay, so Okay, right now I did an undo in the history. I have my move tool selected, so I'm going to move my pedal over. And if you take notice of the edge, pretty sharp. There's a clear distinction there. But if I undo this and go back to my selection tool, right click, select feather. You know what? Let's up the feather from 5 to 10. So I type in 10, hit enter. Now go to the move tool to make the cut. Let's move the pedal out of the way. And you see how blurry the edges come. So feather basically means blurring the edge, feathering it, making it softer. Okay? The larger the number, the larger the blur, I guess you could say. And this is good when you're trying to blend pictures together. You folks may see some of the those memorial pictures to memorialize those who may have passed. You might have seen pictures of the person they're celebrating have a fuzzy edge on the edge of their picture rather than a hard edge, and they're in the clouds or something to that effect. That's what feathering does. It smooths the edge so that you can blend it into other pictures a little bit more easily. Um, there's other situations where you might see a softer edge or whatnot, but that's what feathering does. Is it gives you a softer edge to allow you to blend things a little bit more easily. Okay, let me try a feather that's a little bit larger. So I'm going to go feather again. Let's try 30 this time. Hit enter. And then I'll use my move tool. There, you got a really soft edge now on the feathering. Okay. And if I do a deselect on the pedal here, I'll do Command D. You notice how soft the edge is now. Okay. So as you can see, the feather softens the edge of whatever you're cutting out. Okay. Or it doesn't have to be what you're cutting out. Whatever the selection line is around, feathering will soften the line of your selection line. Okay, so let's undo that. Okay, so I showed you feathering. You know what? For the free transform and transform selection, I'll show you folks that a little bit later when I show you the transform um, commands. Okay, for now, let's just stop with the feathering, and I'll move on to showing you folks the magnetic lasso tool. So I'm going to hit Command D to deselect, and let's switch to the magnetic lasso tool. The magnetic lasso tool is sort of a combination of the regular lasso tool and the polygonal lasso tool. To start off the magnetic lasso tool, all you have to do is left mouse click once to lay down your first point, and then that's it. You don't have to, you can if you want to, but you don't have to keep clicking the left mouse button. All you have to do is move your mouse along the edge of the item that you're trying to select. In this case, it's going to be our pedal again. So I'm going to left mouse click once to lay down the first point. Then all I'm going to do is move my mouse slowly and follow the edge of the flower. And as you can see, Photoshop is automatically laying down points as I move my mouse along the edge of the flower. And what Photoshop is doing is it's looking at the orange, and then it's looking on the other side of the line and comparing the colors. In this case, the other side of the line has a mixture of black, brown, white, green. And when it sees a contrast or a difference of colors, that's where it lays down its points. Now, when we get here, I'm stopping right now. Now, if we continue like how we did before with the other selection tools, Photoshop may have a difficult time distinguishing between the oranges. So let's try it now. It it may be able to get, because there's a pretty solid black line there separating the flowers. And of course, the yellow here is going to have a difficult time. See, so the points are jumping all over the place with the yellow. And if I move here, it's not too bad. And of course, left mouse click to close off the line. So what Photoshop does with the magnetic lasso is it looks at the color on this side of the line and this side of the line, and it knows to lay down a selection line in between those colors where those two colors meet. You see, like here, where the orange meets against the black, where those pixels meet is where Photoshop will lay down a selection line or point with the magnetic lasso tool. I don't particularly care for the magnetic lasso tool, only because sometimes it's finicky and it starts, shooting out selection lines all the way out here or in here. You don't really have a lot of control. I mean, you could, let me start over. You, even though you just push the left mouse button once and trace along, you could actually lay down more points by left mouse clicking again. So I could click with my left mouse button, and I'm doing that right now. I'm laying down points by clicking the left mouse button. Or you could just stop doing that and just drag your mouse like I'm doing right now, not even pushing the left mouse button. So you could have more control, but I just stick with the polygonal lasso tool. And of course, if you want to shoot a line directly back to the starting point, just double click and it shoots a line straight back. Okay. And I'm not really going to go through and show you, how you can paint on the outside. You folks already seen that enough. But just know that in different situations, you folks may want to use this magnetic lasso tool, or the normal lasso tool, or the polygonal lasso tool. In fact, in the next video, we're going to do the magic wand, and I'll show you the difference between using the magic wand and, say, the polygonal lasso tool. Okay? So that's it for now with the lasso tools. Next tool, magic wand.